Hangar 13 is going to be at PAX East coming up on May 8th, and there's going to be a special panel. I talked about this in a previous video, where the developers of Mafia: The Old Country are going to be answering questions from us Mafia fans, and they even asked on the social medias for us to submit questions. And I looked through all the questions that everybody posed, and I put together, I guess you could say, my top 10 questions based on questions asked by fellow Mafia fans in no particular order. By the way, what are some questions that you have regarding Mafia: The Old Country? Feel free and let us know the questions you hope that'll get answered on May 8th at PAX East below in the comments section. The first question: will there be Turkish, Arabic subtitles and other languages? A lot of fans of the Mafia franchise are from Turkey and various other parts of the Middle East. And this is a big question that a lot of them have asked on the social medias. Now, if we look back at Mafia Definitive Edition, this is off of Steam, by the way, of the various languages that were interfaced, had full audio, and subtitles. The main ones were English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, like from Spain, as well as Russian. And the other ones that also got subtitles was Czech, Japanese, Korean, Polish, Portuguese, as well as simplified Chinese, Spanish from Latin America, and traditional Chinese. As far as I can tell, Turkish, Arabic was not subtitled in Mafia Definitive Edition. Hopefully Hangar 13 will have as many languages as possible subtitled for Mafia: The Old Country. The next question revolved around the open world. Several fans were asking, is the game going to be open world? It's going to be set on Sicily, or at least a version of Sicily, in a main city, San Celeste, which was featured in Mafia 2 at the very beginning of the game. That is a very good question, because a lot of us are expecting it to be open world / linear story, similar to Mafia Definitive Edition as well as Mafia 2. So I think it's going to have more in common with those games than Mafia 3, but hopefully we'll at least be able to do some exploring in open world. Hopefully we'll be able to have some open world exploration throughout the town of San Celeste and perhaps even the Sicilian countryside. Don't expect it to be the same size as Sicily with all the towns in Sicily, but hopefully we'll be able to have some exploration in Mafia: The Old Country. The next question a couple of people asked was regarding an online mode. Now, I don't think that we're going to get an online mode in Mafia: The Old Country. This is an idea I had a few years ago for like a future Mafia online game. But I think that Hangar 13 is a much smaller studio, and their focus is making a really amazing single-player, story-based, linear-driven game. And they just don't have the resources for an online version of Mafia: The Old Country. I highly doubt there'll be an online mode in Mafia: The Old Country. The next question is improvements from Mafia Definitive Edition, such as improved gameplay, gunplay mechanics, etc. And I always want a new game to do better than its predecessor, even if it's a really good game. And for the most part, there were some things I liked about Mafia Definitive Edition. It's an amazing remake from the original Mafia game, but it's not perfect. There were some things that could have been improved, and hopefully will be better in Mafia: The Old Country. The next question revolves around Mafia connections and cameos from the other Mafia games, specifically Mafia and Mafia 2, such as a younger Leo Galante, Frank Vinci, Joe Barbaro. Perhaps we'll see a younger Vito Scaletta, maybe his family, before they make their way to America and Empire Bay. Perhaps even a younger Frank and Don Salieri, and maybe some elements that tie into the stories of Mafia and Mafia 2. I think for the most part, the story of Mafia: The Old Country will be its own thing, and there might be some references, but I don't expect to see all these characters show up in Mafia: The Old Country. Maybe we'll get lucky and get one or maybe two of those characters, as long as it makes sense to the overall Mafia story, from Mafia: The Old Country to Mafia 1, Mafia 2, as well as Mafia 3. Next question revolves around several topics like game length, replayability, like a new game plus mode, choices, outcomes, time jumps. I think that there probably will be time jumps in Mafia the Old Country, similar to Mafia 1 and Mafia 2. Game length, I don't expect this to be a long game. Probably around the same length as Mafia the Definitive Edition. Maybe a little bit shorter like Mafia 2, because it's not really a long game either. I guess in this case we're going for quality over quantity, but hopefully it'll be long enough where it doesn't feel like it's wearing out its welcome, while at the same time the story, the length of the game, doesn't feel rushed either. Now we do know that this is going to be a linear story similar to Mafia and Mafia 2, which didn't really give us much choices when it came to outcomes. The outcome was always the same, but in this case I hope we get a few choices that we can make as Enzo, and perhaps like different endings, maybe the good ending or the canonical ending, maybe a bad ending, or maybe an alternative ending. But I don't really expect that, especially if they're going to keep true to Mafia Definitive Edition as well as Mafia 2. So I would like to have alternative choices and endings and replayability. I think there will be replayability with perhaps even a New Game Plus mode and higher difficulty levels, but I just don't see there being different options or choices or outcomes. The next question is about DLC. Will we get DLC for the Old Country? We did get DLC for Mafia 3, which was surprisingly pretty good. There were smaller packs, but the 3 big DLCs were Faster Baby, as well as Stones Unturned, and Sign of the Times. I personally liked all 3 of those story DLCs, and I very much would like to see additional DLCs for Mafia the Old Country. The next question is character customization for Enzo. He's going to have like a base look similar to Tommy Angelo, as well as Lincoln Clay and Vito Scaletta, but it would be nice if we did have some clothing customizations, as well as different hairstyles to choose from, perhaps even some facial hair options, etc. I do like the idea of some character customization for Enzo for Mafia the Old Country. Obviously, it has to make sense with the time period that the game is going to be set in, as well as the location of Sicily. The next question revolves around miscellaneous things to do in Mafia the Old Country. This is actually a few questions people asked that I combined together. Side quests to go along with the main quest, stores and shops to go inside and hang out and purchase food and drinks, as well as customization items that we just talked about for Enzo, like clothing, a barbershop for your hair and facial hair, various safe houses. If we have safe houses, I hope we're able to customize the safe houses, collectibles, and more. All of this I'm absolutely in favor of, perhaps even a turf war between Enzo's gang that he's part of and maybe other Mafia gangs on the island of Sicily that you can have a little side turf war against. Maybe some side business ventures, but at the same time, once again, this is going to be a linear-based story from start to finish, and I don't see all that being included in Mafia the Old Country, but it would be nice if we got some of those things. And the 10th and final question was asked by me. Free ride. Are we going to see free ride in Mafia the Old Country? All you could really do in the main story of Mafia, as well as Mafia Definitive Edition, was play through the story from start to finish. However, there's also free ride mode, which allowed you to go explore the city of Lost Heaven and go out the city of Lost Heaven. And there were some collectibles that you could get, as well as various other minor activities. If Mafia the Old Country is done the same way as Mafia Definitive Edition, whereas in the main story you're just going from mission to mission with nothing in between, hopefully at the very least they can add all the collectibles and side quests and everything else to a free ride version of Mafia the Old Country, allowing you to explore San Celeste as well as, outside throughout Sicily, or their version of Sicily, which would include walking, driving around on the time period of vehicles, and perhaps even riding around on the horses as well. Speaking of horses, hopefully the horse mechanics are pretty good in the game. I don't expect them to be at the same level of detail or immersion as the horses in Red Dead Redemption 2, but since Rockstar Games and Hangar 13 are both under Take-Two, hopefully there was some back and forth between the developers of Red Dead Redemption 2 and Mafia the Old Country, maybe some notes passed, some tips, some hints, some guides, some help, in order to make sure that the horses are at least decent to ride around in Mafia the Old Country, whether it's throughout the main story or perhaps in a free ride version of the game as well. So there's some of the questions that fellow Mafia fans are asking the developers of Mafia the Old Country. Hopefully those questions and others will be answered coming up on May 8th at PAX East. Your thoughts, views, opinions, and questions that you would like to see answered at PAX East for Mafia the Old Country, welcome, as always, below in the comments section.